Good morning, Jennies. I'm Robert Riley, and this is Pickett's Poverty News. Today, we will be investigating the meaning of poverty to college students at Washington and Lee University, a small liberal arts school in Lexington, Virginia, that has a huge focus on poverty studies. My co-host, Victoria Seymour, walked around the historic campus earlier this week, questioning the university's population on their views regarding poverty. Take it away, Victoria.
Thanks, Robert. Poverty poses a threat to the dignity of human life. Without the resources and capabilities to pursue the American dream, it can be difficult for one to rise out of poverty. Implementing a system utilizing the Supplemental Poverty Measurement, also known as the SPM, while also accounting for capabilities, will provide a more all-encompassing measurement of poverty in the United States. So, I interviewed several students to gain their insight on this issue. What comes to mind when you hear the word poverty?
Well, when I think of poverty, I think primarily of a lot of different factors that can play into it, like homelessness and drug abuse and socioeconomic status. And
I think about people who don't have as many opportunities as we do, and people who are less fortunate.
Poverty is not based upon one factor. It is a multifaceted plague stemming from a combined lack of wealth and capabilities. Yet, these factors lead to one question, the question that defines poverty. Is the individual capable of living a dignified life? Of course, the concept of what truly defines a dignified life is still up for debate, but Martha Nussbaum has a fairly vague outline of what that should look like within her 10 central capabilities. 1. Life. 2. Bodily health. 3. Bodily integrity. 4. Senses, imagination, and thought. 5. Emotions. 6. Practical reason. 7. Affiliation. 8. Other species. 9. Play. And 10. Control over one's environment.
By Rawls's theory of justice, all humans are entitled to two things. 1. Each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive basic liberty compatible with a similar liberty for others. And 2. Social and economic inequalities are to be arranged so that they are both reasonably expected to be to everyone's advantage and attached to positions and offices open to all. Now, this is not to say that all inequality is bad. Behind the veil of ignorance, we would want some inequality that we can control. Meaning, if we were to choose to have no inequalities in society, the economy would utterly collapse. However, the inequalities that we cannot control or that people place upon us, such as handicaps formed from pollutants in utero or discrimination due to race, religion, etc., are what cause many people to wind up in poverty. Luckily, the SPM accounts for these uncontrollable drawbacks. According to Nussbaum, at a bare minimum, an ample threshold of 10 central capabilities is required, given a widely shared understanding of the task of government, namely that government has the job of making people able to pursue a dignified and minimally flourishing life. It follows that a decent political order must secure to all citizens at least a threshold level of these 10 capabilities. As you can see, Nussbaum argues that a human must convert all 10 capabilities into functionings in order to live a dignified life. Each capability is essential to living a life that is worthwhile, and through the SPM, people recognize the need for these capabilities in order for people to be lifted out of poverty, accounting for external factors such as geographic location, inequalities, social exclusion, and more. Nussbaum even goes on to argue that if a person cannot obtain access to all 10 capabilities immediately, it is a moral obligation for us to provide everyone with equal access to education in order to gain these missing capabilities. If people have the ability to turn all 10 of Nussbaum's capabilities into functionings, they will be much better off, no matter what their income is. Being that the OPM is based primarily off a person's income, that is why it fails to be an accurate measure of poverty. It does not consider the other struggles people may be having that are preventing them from having life to its full potential. We have few disagreements with Nussbaum, but we do disagree with the belief that you must achieve all 10 capabilities to live a dignified life. We believe that you must have access to all of those capabilities, but we do not believe that you must follow through with them. That is every individual's choice. We are also not naive enough to believe that her list encompasses every facet of what it means to live a dignified life, but we do believe it provides a broad outline of what that should look like for each individual.
The complex nature of poverty can be seen in the relationship between money and capability. Having access to money grants you a greater access to capabilities, and vice versa. For example, having access to wealth can grant you the capability to achieve an outstanding education, while having an outstanding education can grant you the opportunity to obtain a higher paying job and therefore more money.
How do you feel about the government's role in handling poverty?
I think the government is the key contributor to helping these people in the world and providing institutions and programs.
I don't think one person or entity can fix it all. I think it takes a collective effort from a larger group of people to make more of a difference.
I think the government needs to play a big role in handling poverty, which they do currently. The food stamps program is really helpful, but there's still
Poverty is a very difficult beast to tackle, which is why a fairly simple system of thresholds is instituted within the official poverty measurement. The problem with the OPM is that its scope is very narrow-minded. It focuses upon thresholds that maintain a heavy consideration upon income and inflation. As a great deal of poverty can be tied to a lack of income, the OPM is not necessarily incorrect. It simply does not consider some of the most important factors, such as capabilities, resources, geographic location, social inclusion, non-cash benefits, and economic mobility. Taking into account a person's access to resources is a crucial aspect of poverty measurement. If a person does not have the opportunities and resources to enhance their living situation, it is very difficult to overcome the hardships they are enduring and rise out of their situation. Through the SPM's consideration of resources, geographic location, non-cash benefits, and capabilities, a more accurate measurement of poverty in the United States is provided.
Statistics show that 42.2% of sons born into the lowest, in other words, most destitute quintile group, will remain in that same group throughout their life. While that is not a majority, it is still an alarming percentage. A percentage that needs consideration when looking into why individuals struggle to combat their impoverished conditions. Because these statistics show that a decent amount of individuals fall victim to intergenerational poverty. They cannot escape poverty because they lack the capability to do so in the first place.
In fact, many of us are already at a disadvantage in society prior to birth. A huge contributor to poverty that many people overlook is the environmental effect on a person when in utero. According to Janet Currie, birth weight, height, exposure to pollutants, and the conditions surrounding a mother when her fetus is in utero can cause major inequalities in society, which brings us to our next point. Inequality is at the root of many problems associated with poverty. Poverty itself is not the problem you should be concerned with, but rather the suffering and injustices in society that people endure through an impoverished state. As Currie explains, these pre-birth factors can affect us largely in the future, causing inequality of opportunity both socially and economically. If people are harmed when in utero, how is it fair that this handicap thwarts them from having the same opportunity as someone who is not? These are factors we cannot control, which oftentimes people do not realize is how some people fall into poverty. So how do you think poverty should be dealt with?
I think we just can't rely solely on the government. I think people are going to have to step up and take some initiative in getting out to their local neighborhoods.
I think the best way to deal with poverty is starting from the very root, so trying to address sort of the lack of education and meals and the very most basic.
Poverty is the result of such a varying amount of existential factors that there is no true solution. However, there is a way to more accurately identify the level of poverty within the United States. Implementing a more complex, all-encompassing relative system like the SPM, while also accounting for capabilities, will enable the dignity of individuals to be properly represented.
Howard and Pickett are both living alone with an annual income of $15,000. Both are above the poverty line, which is around $12,000 for a single person under 65. However, there is one major difference between Howard and Pickett. Pickett has cancer. Thus, there are many non-discretionary expenses, such as medical bills, that need to be accounted for. Even though they have the same economic situation, there are other factors that contribute to a person's well-being. While Howard is fine making ends meet, Pickett is struggling due to the immense medical bills he has to pay to treat his cancer. This is where a huge issue with the OPM comes into play. The OPM does not take into consideration a person's non-discretionary expenses, and thus is an insufficient measure of poverty. The SPM, on the other hand, does take into account these expenses, making it a superior measurement of poverty to the OPM. Overall, the SPM catches far more people in poverty than the OPM does. The OPM's major shortcoming is that it does not take into account the external factors that can contribute to suffering from poverty. And if we implement the SPM while also accounting for a person's access to the capabilities in order to live a fulfilling life, more people will receive the help they need.
I'm Robert Riley.
And I'm Victoria Seymour.
Thank you for tuning in to Pickett's Poverty News.
Have a good night.